Welcome into the 7th episode of Meet Your Aldermen. My name's Jon Zaghloul, our Communications Director. Great to have you here as we continue this series. This month we're talking with one of the veteran City Council members as we take a look at his aldermanic career, his longtime involvement in Aurora, and his continued goals for the city's 5th Ward. He's a retired air traffic controller, 3-term alderman, and member of the Public Health, Safety, and Transportation Committee, as well as the Finance Committee. Let's welcome 5th Ward Alderman Carl Franco to Meet Your Aldermen. Alderman Franco, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. You know, interesting, as I read off your intro, 3-term alderman. What's that mean to you?
Well, that means that my constituents were happy with my performance because they kept electing me. I remember the first time I ran, 2,300 people cast a vote. I won by 23 votes, 1%. So that was an awakening. But then subsequently, once they saw what I can do and how I represented them, then I won by significant margins going forward. So I'm happy about that. The fact I've been in and they keep wanting me back is a good feeling.
What makes representing the 5th Ward specifically so special to you?
Well, I moved to Aurora in the early 80s, became an air traffic controller in Aurora. And so this is a place that my wife and I decided to raise our family. And so where you raise your family and where you committed, so I've been on, the Little League organizations and the high school organizations and the Park District, I was a trustee there. So when you get involved and you become a fabric of the community, you're like, what more can I do? This is who we are. So I feel it's a very special place because I raised my family there. I did all this other stuff. So for me, this was like the next step going forward to help out the citizens, the people I had met over the 30 or 40 years that I've been here.
You know, you think about, everybody talks about the 5th Ward and they talk about engagement. Your audience and your constituency is so engaged. How has that come together during your time as alderman? Well,
let's go back a few years. I think it was about 7 years ago, Aurora was voted one of the top 10 engaged cities in the world, shockingly. I mean, I was like, where did that come from? And I think my ward is maybe the most engaged ward in the city. So if you connect those dots, it's pretty significant. But it is good because I get a lot of feedback. I do remember, though, when I first came in, a couple of staff people said, Alderman, I just want to let you know about your ward. They're very finicky. And I've seen that. I get a lot of calls, but the finickiness makes the ward better. It keeps us on our toes and makes sure the property standards are kept up. Everything is like it should be because I get phone calls at a time and we address it. So I think their engagement makes me better to do my job to make sure that the city and at least that area of town looks as good as it can.
And I would assume from an engagement perspective, because they are so engaged, it really helps you to set good priorities for your ward and for what you want to see get done in Ward 5.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're an alderman, you don't we get how many things we vote on every week. You don't referendum everything. So it's hard to know exactly what your constituents are thinking unless they engage. And the more they engage, the more I talk to them, I feel very comfortable making a vote, kind of know where their heads are at. And over the years, since I've been here for so long, it's been a little bit easier. But because of that, I feel comfortable when I make a vote, say, I know I'm representing the majority because I talk to them all the time.
When you first got in, I'm curious, what was that process like, learning the ropes and then now becoming a 3-term alderman? What's been the difference in that time frame?
I don't think a whole lot. Okay. I really don't. Because I had been so involved, I had been head of a number of organizations. So I got to learn, I knew how to deal with people. And I've learned how, which buttons they push on me, which buttons I push on them. So I think there's just an extension. I don't think there was a whole lot new there. It was just, it's a learning process. And when I became alderman, I was 56 years old. So I wasn't a young person kind of learning how people are. I kind of knew, I'd been around the block a little bit. So I think all that was fairly easy. So I don't think there was a whole big difference between when I first got into now.
What prompted you to initially run? What made you want to go from such a big involvement in the community, of course, to then take that next step and run for 5th Ward Alderman?
Whitey Peters. So Whitey was my alderman. He was a 3-termer, but he was kind of ill. And he wasn't going to run for a 4th term. And he asked me, he says, Carl, I know you've been involved with this. Would you be willing to run in my place? This was the fall of 2014. And I knew I was retiring in March of 2015, was his mandatory retirement. And I said, sounds pretty good to me because I'll be done with one. Because I couldn't do both because my schedule was just too tough. So he asked me to. I said yes. I retired on a Saturday in March, and I got elected on a Tuesday, first Tuesday in April. So it was right, boom, boom. But it was because he asked me. That's really what it was.
What a whirlwind. Tell me about how you felt to then retire, then turn around, win an election, and become the 5th Ward Alderman.
Well, I will tell you the whirlwind was the last month that I worked, the March of 2015, because I had worked, staffing shortages were a thing back then, even though they are, and they still are now with air traffic control. I worked more overtime that month, whether it be 6-day weeks or 10-hour days, the whole month, more than I ever worked in my whole career, 33 years. And then I'm trying to campaign, and I'm, on my breaks at work, I'm looking at the sheets, who I got to talk to next. So that whirlwind was that last month. It was just so much work. And then the other thing, it was kind of relief when the election was over. It's almost like, if I don't win, at least it's over, So, but that was the whirlwind. It was really getting ready for retirement, and then having all that work, and then jumping into this, because it's a lot of work to run, especially the first time. You don't know how things work as far as what doors to go to and this and that. So I had to learn that. But yeah, it was a lot.
What do you think changed between the first time you ran versus now obviously running 3 separate times and winning all 3 times?
Well, so when you run the first time, they don't throw a lot of stones at you because you don't really have that much of a record, good or bad. When you run subsequently, now you're the incumbent, and that's a big difference, because now they say, you voted for this, you voted for that, you didn't vote for this, you didn't. So that was a little bit different because they were going on my resume, but my resume was apparently good enough for what I had done in office, because I got voted by quite a bit, significant margins each time. So I think that was it, just being the incumbent. You're the guy now, where they're pointing fingers at you, good or bad. So there was that.
What's it meant to you to serve on the council for 12 years, almost?
Well, I'm very honored to have served on the council. I mean, some of the decisions we make we're affecting people's lives. We make very important decisions. I hope people understand that. Not every vote is important, but there are some crucial ones out there that change the direction of the city, change the dynamic, change day-to-day operations. People have said for years in the political climate, local elections matter, and they do. Because something that they vote on in Washington or Springfield may not affect you, but here it does, and it affects your everyday life. So I've taken that responsibility seriously because I know that it matters. And so, that's kind of what it is. It's just knowing that what you do matters and makes a difference, and you have to be very careful when you do that. You have to give it a lot of consideration.
Can you tell me maybe about a time, going off of that, is there a specific vote maybe that you could think of where you're like, man, this is a really big vote, it's going to affect a lot of lives, and it turned out to be the right choice?
Well, there's been so many over the years. The casino was a big one. Mm-hmm. You're talking about $360 million project that's going to bring in $8 to $10 million extra a year. I think that was a big one. Another one that was, I didn't think was that controversial, but there was people out there that thought it was, when marijuana became legal in Illinois. And then there was the concern about selling it in Aurora. Well, I said, this is going to be a tough vote, but here's the deal. If they're going to smoke it in Aurora because it's legal, why aren't we capturing that money? So I wanted to make sure everybody understood that if Naperville sells it and we don't, they're going to get money, and the people of Aurora are going to be smoking it. So those type of votes were, not easy, because there are some people against it, but that made the right difference, because now it's millions of dollars to our budget because we're doing that because it's going to be done. If they wanted to argue about whether we should do it or not, if it's legal, that's one thing. But once it's legal, you got to capture the revenue because somebody else is. And if they're going to smoke it here, why wouldn't you? So I think those two are pretty big, financially speaking.
What do you attribute your longevity on the council to?
I just think that, I think the rewards that I get, from helping people out, there's sometimes it's tough, but there's sometimes you do something that's very rewarding. And every time you look back at that, you're like, okay, this is why I do it. So it keeps you going. I can give you one example. Here's an instance that I always remember that I just like, this is what it's about. There was, when I first started my grant program, there was a woman lived on the west side, and shockingly, they still have septic tanks there. So her septic tank, it was a young Hispanic mother, unmarried, she had 2 kids, and the septic tank was leaking in the backyard. So she was eligible for my grant programs, it was affecting the neighborhood and stuff like that. But she didn't have the money to pay for half of it. The grant program is half of this, half of that. So it was a $12,000 gig. I was putting up $6,000, and she couldn't get a loan because she hadn't been in the house long enough. So she couldn't get the home equity loan. So I shouldn't have done this, but I said, I will co-sign the loan for you, personally co-sign the loan for you. All right, that was, maybe I shouldn't have done it, maybe whatever. I did my homework on where she worked and stuff like that. But But here's the beauty of this. Christmas Eve morning, they finished the project. It was a beautiful day out, finished the project. I drive by to find out what's going on. I go up the door, I says, how's things? She runs out, she gives me this big hug. She starts crying, says, Alderman, she said, my kids can finally drink water out of the faucet. I can take a shower without having grime in my hair. Thank you so much for doing this. So it's instances like that that's the reward of what you did personally and professionally. And then you say, this is why I do it. I mean, there's been a couple other things like that, but you just need a couple of those nuggets to say, all right, now I get it. And so I think that's what keeps you going. I think that's what other aldermen keep them going, is the fact that you have these special moments where you do something and it makes a difference.
Amazing story. Alderman Carl Franco here with us on the 7th episode of Meet Your Aldermen. And Alderman, something I did want to talk about as we talk about you serving 3 terms and doing all these great things for the community is the fact that you have chosen to not run for a 4th term, which was definitely shocking. What's the idea behind that?
Well, so as I mentioned on my social media post, I told my family when I ran, I said, I'll probably do, if elected, I will do 2, maybe 3 terms. I'm not a term limit guy necessarily, but I can see why a person could get stale. But I made that commitment to them because it does take an effect on your family. I mean, there's, especially right now, there's a little hate and vitriol out there. And I know it's been tough on my family when they hear things about me that aren't true. And I know other aldermen and alderwomen are going through it. But it was just time. Maybe if I was 40 or 50 years old, I keep going, but I'm 67 right now. I know I got the energy to do it, but I just thought it was time. It was a commitment I made. I just think that what I like to think of too is that I've already had young people come to my house from the 5th Ward area over the last couple of years, mentoring them, preparing them for public life. Because I've been in public life, I've been in the government for 44 years, I've been in public life for 40 years, to prepare them for that. Because I think it's our responsibility to nurture and mentor the next generation. They're going to have some questions. How do I do this? What do I do about that? So I had done that with a number of younger people, and I just think the baton, it's probably the time to hand that baton to them. They're good young people. They got good heads on their shoulders. So I like that. I think that's our responsibility going forward. Always make sure the next generation is prepared. Do what you can to make things a nice transition. So all that into the blender is kind of how I made my decision.
I'm curious, what are some of the tenets that you've been teaching some of these younger people, especially if there are others watching who are wondering, how do I get into public life? What are some of the things that you've been teaching? I've
been teaching them to be committed. Once you feel strongly about something and you know that you have support from your community, be committed and be ready to explain yourself. Don't be afraid to say, if you don't take the easy road because it's going to be hard to explain, if it's a good idea, explain it. So I tell them, I said, just make the case. People want you to be honest. I don't want to get into it's better to be respected than liked, but you have to be respected. You have to be respected. So you have to tell the truth all the time. Sometimes it's hard. And I know people say, all the politicians lie. Well, no, we don't all lie. And we don't all embellish. So I tell them, you have to tell the truth, but be committed and make the case. Because they're going to want to see somebody that's got a little backbone and spine. So you've got to show them that. And some people, if they smell weakness, they're like, it's like blood in the water. And so you have to be strong with it too. So I tell them all those things about character, integrity, telling the truth. I think those are important things because I value that. I think most of my constituents value that. And if they do, that's how you're going to get elected again.
How does it feel for you to know that you're going to be stepping away from this role that you've had for 12 years?
I got mixed emotions. Right now I'm kind of happy to see the end, kind of coming up. But I know when I get close to that, I may not. I'm just wondering, am I still going to be fairly vocal in the community? I've learned a lot of things, and I'd like to share that going forward. But it's bittersweet, I guess. It hasn't hit me yet because I'm in the middle of summer and I got some other projects going on. So once I have a time to sit down and think about it, then it's probably going to be a little bit more, emotional maybe. Yeah. I
was going to say, I would assume there's such an emotional tie to the 5th Ward too, not only for the fact that you've lived there for so long, but that you've represented that community for 12 years.
Well, and what gets you going. So when I announced I was stepping down, I had a lot of phone calls, a lot of people contacted me, and they gave me some very nice comments. So when you get those nice comments, they're very passionate, emotional comments, then it kind of gets you a little bit. You're like, oh, I didn't know you thought that highly of me. Because a lot of times, gauging how you do as an alderman or alderwoman is hard. We're not like we're making widgets on the production line or anything like that. So it's hard to tell sometimes how you look in their eyes, and that's really what matters. But now, because of what I've done, they're all coming out of the woodwork saying, thank you, we appreciate your job. So that's been a good thing. It's starting to get me a little bit because of that. Yeah.
What has it meant to you to serve the 5th Ward like you have for the past 12 years?
Well, the 5th Ward historically is, like I said, is most engaged. We got a couple of ex-mayors live there. We have a number of people, high-ranking city officials that live there, people that work for the staff live there. So it means a lot to me that they're supporting me and they know what it takes to be an alderman. So I just think when when I coached all these kids, all the people that I know that coach their kids in baseball and soccer and basketball and tennis and stuff like that, you form an alliance with them and you're a bond, a community bond. So I'm very proud that I got to serve them in this role after doing all that stuff with those people too. So I'm kind of like, keep going on how I was going to help the community, how the enhancements of the community and that. So when you raise your kids to a certain spot, it matters. It just does.
I'm curious, how did your skill set from coaching apply to your aldermanic role?
Coaching and my aldermanic role are basically came from my air traffic control days. And it's about being in control. It's like, all right, somebody's got to do this, and I will do it. So you have to, when you see a situation that's not under control, it's not structured the right way, you step in. You're not reluctant, you're not apprehensive, you step in. So I think because that's how I was taught to work, I think it did me well in coaching. I think it did me well here. You just take the bull by the horn and says, hey, this is my job, let's go. There's no scapegoats, there's no dodging anything. It's on me, let's go, let's do it. And I think that mindset from that helped me in both of those things.
Very interesting. Alderman Carl Franco still with us on Meet Your Alderman, the 7th episode here inside of Aurora City Hall. Alderman, as we look towards the future of Ward 5, you're still going to be in office for some more months, and then you're going to have a successor. What are some priorities for the board moving forward?
Well, it's funny you should say that. We just had a meeting yesterday. So you may know, most people know, we've been working on Sound Barrier and Orchard Road for 2026, I'm going to say 10 years. It's been a slow process. So we had a meeting yesterday. Long story short, we had a meeting yesterday with the mayor's office, and we're on the cusp. So we're going to have a meeting with our constituents in 2 weeks, and basically we're presenting them 2 plans. One with a sound barrier that's not the Cadillac of sound barriers, but much less expensive, and we can do a little bit more with the height. And what I found out yesterday from talking to engineers, even though the density of the material is somewhat important for the decibel level, the height is a little bit more. So that was one thing. So we had one example there. Then another one would be a little bit, well, actually much more expensive, digging into the ground, which may cost us more money. Maybe having to do an SSA because we wouldn't have all the money with that. We probably wouldn't be able to get it done until 2027. So we're going to bring these 2 situations to the table in a couple of weeks, let them go forward with what they want. My guess is we're going to go with the less expensive one, no SSA, still going to do a good job, make it a little bit higher, which is a big deal. So that's the big one. And so I think that's the one I've been working on for a long time. The other things, it's just trying to get more retail or commercial type of things on the west side. I know we got we got a lot of new developments going up. We got 310 units going up by the Home Depot. We got 108 units going up behind the Aldi. We had Prairie Meadows, which is 74. This new area that's by the Toyota plant, that 22 acres of frontage road. We may get some townhomes there too, and some other economic development. So I think that whole package of people moving there will allow us to get more commercial things that people want. I know they've been complaining for years. I don't know that people don't understand that I can't make a phone call and say, Costco, you're coming, Portillo's, you're coming. That's not how it works. But what we can do, and I think what we have done, is created the environment. I think people don't understand. That's the most important thing, or almost the only thing a city can do. Well, that would be infrastructure, make sure the roads are good, make sure all the infrastructure and the bridges are safe. Got that. A lot of traffic on Orchard Road, which people in the retail business and commercial love a lot of traffic on Orchard Road. And then the consumers. One of the things that we had got complaints about in the past is we didn't have enough they call them rooftops. Well, now I just talked about 600 new units coming there, maybe 1,200 more people. Now we're more attractive to somebody bringing stuff in there because all these consumers are right there too. And most of the areas are market rate, so they'll have disposable income, which is very important too. So I think going forward, we've done what we can with that. Now the next step is, all right, look what we've done, everybody. Now will you come here because we're ready to spend some money. So I think we've, slowly but steadily had done that on the west side. There's still this theory about, and I think it's moving a little bit. Years ago, they said people aren't going to drive from the western suburbs past Route 59. It's kind of like the end spot. Well, I think Orchard Road is going to become the end spot now, so hopefully they'll start coming there a little bit. It just takes a while, So I think that's another big thing that we're getting ahead of and looking forward to, because not only do people want that for convenience, we like the tax revenue. We want to keep our taxes down as much as we can. So every time the business opens up something new, property taxes, sales taxes, food and beverage, so that's all good stuff. So those two things I think have been the biggest so far.
I think it's really exciting to hear about Orchard Road. I know that's been a long time coming. Tell me about that process from when you started it to where we are now.
So first of all, this has never been done before. It really hasn't. When you see these sound barriers up and different things, federal government comes in, they have their calculations, their metrics on why they do it, and they just do it. This was a piecemeal thing about, all right, we want to get this done. Nobody's ever been able to do it before or didn't even try. We should have actually done it right when they put it up 30 years ago, but that's another story. So we had to find money. It's always about the money. So you had to find the money. So I went out, and with the help of the third floor from the last administration, and I said, all right, I'm going to start saving. So I'm going to start saving money, and I got $600,000 I saved over the years for mine. And then we talked to some other legislators, and they came up with some money. We had the city come up with money. It was very interesting because the original agreement between us and Kane County, because that's a Kane County road, so they had some say in this too. But the original agreement with the fence was we would pay for the maintenance of the fence, City of Aurora, but when you replace the fence, it's a 50-50 proposition. So I guess maybe all these years they were just kind of waiting for it to deteriorate to the point where we got to replace the whole thing. So we're there. So now we got to talk to the county about putting in their fair share. And I remember in 2017, I went to a transportation committee meeting at Kane County, and it's kind of like what we do. 3 minutes, you get to speak. Now, I thought I'm the alderman of the 5th Ward. It's under your jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah. I would get a little bit more of a good reception. As soon as I made my case, I remember the guy said, thank you, but we don't do that. And that was it. It was like, move on. I was taken aback a little bit. I'm like, whoa, all right. I'm talking about your constituents as well as my constituents. So that was shocking to me, but we still moved ahead. And over the years, kudos our engineering department. They worked with Kane County. So little by little over the years, we accumulated money. Kane County says, all right, I'll match your funds, Aurora City. How much you putting in? We were going to put in $1 million. They're going to put in about $1 million. But then we found out the expenses were going up. When I first did this thing, it was going to be a $3.5 million project. Well, now it's close to $6 million. It's just because things gone up. So the longer you wait, that happens. So we've been chasing money. But I think we have the money now from a number of different factors, but it was just slow. It was a long process. And I know government moves slow. I've been there for a long time. But because there was no blueprint, this was all new to us. So we're trying to figure things out on the fly. So I give people credit, even though it took a long time. Now, anybody that does this subsequently, they can look at our model and maybe it goes better, but we were the guinea pig. But I don't mind that because I want to get this done because when I first campaigned, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you a story. John Lehman, ex-fire chief here, he moved from Sugar Grove when he became fire chief to Orchard Road. He had to live in the city. His house backed up to Orchard. I went over there one time before I was even thinking about an alderman. And I'm sitting on the back porch with him. I said, I can't hear you, John. What are you saying? He said, this is Orchard Road. We got to go inside. So I learned early on, I said, you can't enjoy your outside in the summertime. We got a 3 or 4 month window, nice weather, and we can't be out here. So I thought that kind of stunk. And then when I got in, I didn't campaign on it. I thought to myself, is there a way to make this happen? So we just kind of nickel and dimed along the way, and we kind of gained some momentum. And, about 5 years ago, I said, we can get this done now. We figured we can get this done. So we just kept moving along, and here we are.
Well, I think that's a really good point to bring up too, right? Because like you said correctly, people cite examples like in Oswego or Boulder Hill, that big road, that is a U.S. route. That is a federal government road, versus something like this, which is Kane County. That's going to require a lot of different people and a lot of different moving parts to put that into motion. Right, and I feel kind of bad. So one of the reasons I want to do an SSA, it was not so much that we need the money, although we were a little short initially, but that was okay. It wasn't going to be that much. It was the equity factor. So there's two things. There's people all over the City of Aurora, 9th Ward, 6th Ward, 4th Ward, that are paying SSAs for improvements in their area.
I always thought, well, if this is improvement, because there's a fence, we could put a new fence in there. Why aren't we contributing like there? So I thought that was the fairness factor. And then if you're the Kane County, for example, and you could just go right by the Geneva Commons, across the street from there, the same kind of wooden fence blocking people. When we get our fence, they found $1 million there. Like, hey, how come we don't have a fence? Why don't you put a fence in or a sound barrier for us? That's a fair thing. People are going to ask that question. So going forward, there could be some people in other parts of Kane County, even the City of Aurora, says, I want that too. All right, then go find the legislators, go find your aldermen to find the money, do all that. But that was kind of why an SSA would have been okay, because it says at least they're contributing. They got some skin in the game. So that was always part of the reason. But to get this thing done, we were going to get it done. So, but I could see the reasoning why people wanted that. I get it, but at the end of the day, it can't be a deal breaker, and it's not going to be a deal breaker.
And that's a really encouraging thing, too, the fact that there may be an option without an SSA, because, I mean, the residents are really then going to benefit not only from the fact that the wall will be up, but they may not necessarily have to pay into it, too.
I think when we present this thing, when you measure decibel levels, there's a measuring device and there's a human ear. And I don't think people care what the measuring device is. If I don't hear it, I don't care what that thing says. So if you're talking about the difference between 2 or 3 decibel levels, and you can't tell the difference with the human ear, then I don't think it's going to be a big difference. And I think that's what we're talking about here. Again, the height matters a little bit more, because when the sound comes, it may come over the top. So an 8-foot fence that's even this thick is not going to be as good as a fence this thick that goes up higher, that type of thing. So I think they're going to go with that, because, I would. I don't pay a thing, and I'm going to get a good fence. It's going to be better, and it's going to be higher, and I'm going to get it right away. And I look at things, too. As I get older, I guess I'm like, I only have so many years left. If you want to enhance my life, enhance it now. Don't enhance it 10 years from now, because I'm going to be, in my 80s. So do it now. So I think we're losing time where people are, enjoying life. And let's get it done for them now, so they can enjoy the next 5 years instead of the next 2 years, and, they move out or whatever the case may be. So while it's not urgent, I think the expediency is kind of a big deal for some people. They just wanted their quality of life to start now. So I think that's fair.
Alderman Carl Franco still with us on Meet Your Aldermen. Alderman, it's been a great conversation so far, and as we look towards wrapping up today's program, wanted to ask you about your career, going back to that for a second. What's been the most funny or the most interesting or unexpected moment that you've had so far as your time as alderman? Unexpected
moment. Well, I don't want to be sour at all with this. I think as time has gone on, and it's not just Aurora, I think it's certainly in the state and nationally, that the anger, the lack of debate is a problem. I think that's kind of changed for the worse, because when I first got in, it was like we talk about anything, but I think over the last few years, I think it's been a little bit troubling that people, instead of asking you a question, they would just rather call you a name. And I just think that, for people going forward, and I don't want to, change the subject here, but my concern is I can take all that. I really don't care. It's just verbiage. It's not true most of the time. But when people see people going through these things, where people are calling them names and stalking their house and all that kind of stuff, then the good people that you would want to be the next in line to run, they're sharp, they have integrity, they may not want to do it. They may not want to put themselves through that. So I think that's a change that I haven't liked. Now, it's not Aurora, it's just nationally, but we got to get away from that, because we can't leave good people who would do a good job on the sidelines because they don't want to get into this mess. And I don't blame them. So I think we need to have a correction with that. I hope that changes, because I disagree with a lot of elected officials, but I really don't, with most of them, I don't disagree with what they're trying to do, their sincerity. And if they're trying to do a good job and they just don't happen to do what you like, all right, then they just don't, and then vote them out. But don't be, disparaging them and stuff like that, because we're going to lose good people. And, good people make a difference. Professionals make a difference, all that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping we get away from that. I'm hoping that we're at the end of that. Maybe in a year or two, we'll get back to the reset button. I just think that we need to be more congenial and work a problem, as opposed to pointing fingers at people when there is a problem. I just hope that changes.
Alderman, I really appreciate your time. This was such a great episode. So many nuggets about your career, and obviously best wishes for the rest of your term as things move forward.
Well, thank you very much. It's really been an honor to serve the 5th Ward, and I appreciate the opportunity that the people have given me, and I hope that going forward we'll have good people still being in the 5th Ward, because it really matters to me about the future of our town. I'm hoping we continue on that path.
Thank you all so much for watching. We will see you next time on Meet Your Alderman. So long.